As Travis Jones and Ben Cant here with the RBT podcast. Today we're talking about habits. We're going to talk about how to break bad habits, how to make good ones, how to make them stick. I think habit creation or formation is probably one of the most crucial things to anyone trying to achieve a body transformation. Ben, what's up, buddy?
Just trying to get through our technical difficulties, my man. Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, mate. Yourself?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. Coming off the back end of the last podcast, it was a 2-hour episode on how to transform your body over 16 weeks, or busting through plateaus, setting up calories and macros. If you haven't listened to that one, guys, go back and check out those episodes. But today, it is all about habits, because this actually should have happened before the other podcast, because you really can't stick to your calories and you can't stick to your macros and all the rest of it unless you create habits around it. How do you find your habit creation, Benny?
Well, just to address that point, we gave them what they want. Now they get what they need.
This is the truth. This is the truth.
What was your question? How do I what?
How do you address your habits? Like you're coaching, obviously with RBT, we coach over about 2,500 members. But yourself personally, you're coaching about 50 online plus people at the moment. What's the biggest thing that you find with habits? Like tell me about your approach.
Look, first of all, I suppose, it depends on the clientele, but let's just talk about like general population habits here. I think by the time people reach out to mentors, to coaches, to personal trainers, there's usually a frustration has set in, and every individual comes with a set of habits that are not very conducive to where they want to be in life. And so, part of that process is just taking the time to sit with them and have them evaluate those habits, because until you sort of take the time to sit back and reflect, you don't sort of really, because by the nature of what a habit is, it's sort of like an automated process that really governs much of what we do throughout the day, so that we don't have to go consciously thinking about every single little thing that we do. So there is a very good reason why we form habits. Unfortunately, we form many habits that are heading us in the wrong direction. So part of that process has to be, when you start working with anyone, is like, look, we've got to sit down and do a little bit of homework here. Let's start identifying what are the good things that we do that head us the ship in the right direction, and what are the things that head us in the wrong direction.
So I think it's a crucial thing, man. Like when we're looking at any type of habits, like, we have the habits, or habits, essentially create our standards, the standards that we live by on a daily basis. And if you don't have standards, well, they are your standards, right? Like, your habits are around how many hours of sleep you have each night, on the type of food quality or quantity you eat, on how much you train or how much you don't train. Pressing snooze on the alarm every single morning becomes a habit for people. And all of a sudden, they're just used to pressing snooze instead of getting up. Going to the movies, like this is probably one of the crucial ones I always talk to people about, right? Going to the movies, people have a set thing they get every single time, right? Like you get a chocolate top and popcorn, or someone might go, no, I just have a Coke Zero, or I might just have a mineral water. Well, that is your habits set around the environment that is movies, right? Like every single thing that we have these things that we habitually do, so we don't have to think about it. And when we look at the habits, if we go across like what the habit formation is, there's always essentially like a cue, there's a routine, it's like a cue, a response, or a routine, and there's a reward. So like that's when we look at all these habits. Like when we're looking at bad habits, there's a cue that sort of triggers that trigger that creates the routine of the bad habit, and then we get that reward from that bad habit. So it's a stressful day. That was my trigger. The routine, I knock back some wine. The reward, I forget about my day and probably all of my problems. But that is essentially like a bad habit. There is also like good habits, and we have to look at how can we create these triggers, and how can we create these routines, and how can we create these rewards. And I think everything we talk about today is essentially, surrounding, that habit loop, I guess.
Yeah, and it's really easy for these feedback loops to get hijacked. You know what I mean? Like marketing as an industry hijacks that loop for us. You know what I mean? So I think, when it comes to someone wanting to engage in like a health and fitness journey, setting the goal is important, but what we're really trying to do is reverse engineer the set of things that have to occur for that person to hit that goal. And more often than not, like there's a bit of a reality check that comes along with that, because people set goals for things like, I want to run a marathon. I want to get up on a fitness stage. I want, it's like these things, and that's a fleeting moment in time. You know what I mean? That's like, if you are going to set aside your happiness or your like some kind of emotional tie-in to an event, then you're going to spend a lot of time being unhappy, and really what you want to be is the person that can do that. You know what I mean? You want to have this set of habits and behaviors or skill acquisition or whatever is required to achieve that goal. But what we have is, a 90% focus on the goal, leaving only 10% left to focus on the processes and systems required to achieve it, rather than the other way around. We would like to go, hey, what do you want to achieve? Okay, cool. So that's what we're looking over doing this year. Don't worry about that anymore. We know where we have to go. Let's look at what has to be done, those little steps every day that we can, build momentum and get us heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I actually did a post on Facebook the other day, and I was talking about like the unsexy way to transform your body in 2020. Like everyone wants to have a 12-week transformation. They want to achieve it by March, but they also wanted that in 2019, probably 2018, 2017. And every single year, we're in January right now, we have these lofty goals that we want to transform in 12 weeks. But what if you just focused on 12 months and you installed habits? And the habit of January is I'm going to eat, 6 servings of vegetables each day. The habit of I'm now going to stack on top of that habit, I'm going to sleep 7 hours each night. And then like the habit in March, I'm going to actually, turn up to the gym 7 days a week. It's not trained, but you might like do some mobility or something like that. But you're stacking these habits month on month. So you're not trying to do everything at once. I think everyone tries to do this, right? It's like, they don't even want to just train for they want to train for like 60 minutes. And it's all or nothing. It's like, I'm going to hit a 1,600 calorie deficit. I'm going to sleep 8 hours a night. I'm going to basically train 7 days a week. I'm going to do all this stuff at once. And we didn't even look at your life right now. Like, we have to understand, it's like your body and your mind doesn't flip overnight. And also they don't look at it, like you said before, it's like the feedback over their past, because you have to sacrifice who you were for who you want to become, because you can't live your old life. All those habits that you did have, we need to start to change them, and they just don't change overnight. When you're looking at habits, for me personally, if I'm trying to install a new habit, we have to look at, do you actually want to achieve this? I think you have to have some form of motivation around it. And then people have to believe, like, can I do this? And then you have to be prompted to do it. There has to be a trigger in there. So that's what I sort of look at. And a couple of things in there, I also don't make it too hard. Because if you make something too hard, all of a sudden people lose trust in themselves. And if you lose trust in yourself, you lose belief in yourself. And all of a sudden there's that all or nothing mindset. And then people start sabotaging, overeating on the weekend, it's like, keep saying, I'm going to start again on Monday. And all of a sudden it's 2021.
Yeah, exactly. And, what we'll often encounter is, someone comes to you and they've had a disaster of a month. Okay. They've come back from Christmas and New Year's, and we're talking about just getting wasted, like, put on 10 kilos or whatever it is. And then says, right, January 1st, I'm going to do 7 days. I'm going to eat every single meal on track. I'm going to go train 7 days. I'm going to go to bed by 9 o'clock every day. And in theory, like, that's great. In reality, that doesn't happen. Okay, because even though we're talking about basic, behaviors that are conducive to the goal, it's actually far beyond what that person is capable of committing to straight away. So what happens is failure. Okay, we don't hit it, we throw in the towel, and again, we're stuck with this all or nothing approach, which lends itself to just viciously coming back to doing nothing. So, one of the things that I know you do really well is, you talk about like tracking and measuring and gamifying things. Okay. Yeah. So like capitalizing on this feedback loop, okay, that we talked about before, this reward aspect of it by, like getting a thumbs up, like ticking off a box, like whatever it is, like that feeds into our brain, our biology to reinforce these things. You know, like Keystone's an example of that, right? We're heading down that with the app that sort of tracks, measures, and helps people with nutrition, training, all that kind of thing.
Exactly, man. I think when the biggest thing I like is I like people to feel like they're winning. And like you said, you've set this goal off, and whether you're a 30% body fat male and you want to get abs and get under 10%, or you're a female who wants to feel great in a bikini, you've set this goal, and it probably takes about 20 weeks, 30 weeks to achieve this goal. Now, when you set that goal, you feel good in the moment, and all of a sudden that moment passes, and now you have to do the work. And there's no like rewards along the way to keep you on track. And for us, we are instant gratification society. So, you know, essentially our brain lives through two parts. It's like, oh, the night before, it's like, oh, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to train. And then the next morning comes around and you're like, oh no, I'm going to press snooze, pull up the blanket because I want to just sleep for another hour. So we need to go, okay, cool. How can we kick in a reward center that essentially makes us do this? And James Clear talks about this a lot. You know, it was one of the guys who did like a paperclip strategy, and he was a stockbroker, and all he did was had 120 paper clips on the left at the start of the day, and it was in a bin, and there was 120 clips on the there was an empty jar on the right. And every single day he didn't watch the stocks. He wasn't the smartest guy there. He was actually like 22 years old, and in that year that he did this, he became the top earner in his firm. He would just do 120 calls a day. So he would basically grab the paper clip from the left, and when you make a call, you put it on the right. Grab it from the left and put it on the right. Now, I was talking about this the other day, whether you can do this similar. I don't care if you use paper clips, you do it at home. And the paperclip strategy could be around, did you follow your nutrition today? And also, did you train today? And all of a sudden you have 14 paper clips on a weekly basis. And then, it's 28 every fortnight. And then obviously there's 56 every month. And if you transfer 50 paper clips over the space of a month, like buy yourself some new workout clothes, or buy that holiday that you want to go on. Because I'm telling you right now, if you do 50 out of 56, you're definitely heading in the right direction because there is a reward. And as you move that paper clip, you're getting those signals in the brain. It's like, yes. It's like I create to-do lists and I write it down just so I can tick it off. Because I want that feel-good moment, right? I'm like, yes, I'm progressing in life. But if you can do this and if you can tick it off, and I always have 5 things I want to do each day, and I always want to win the day. Okay. So for your health and fitness journey, you can start with 1 or 2 things, and then you can progress to 3 and 4 things, which is the sleep and the stress and the stress mitigation. But when we're looking at it, man, I think having some form of reward feedback loop that keeps you on track is one of the crucial things to habit creation. Because what happens, you can look back over the month and you can go, man, I only moved 20 paper clips out of 56. That's the reason why my body hasn't changed. And instead, next month, okay, I can focus on moving 30 instead of 20. And then the following month, I can focus on moving 40 instead of 30. And as long as you're progressing inside in the right direction, those incremental gains, by the end of the 6 months, you're moving 50 out of 56 paper clips. Your body is completely transforming in front of you. And all you've used is a feedback loop across 2 habits you were trying to implement.
Yeah. If we were to scale this way back, right, to just someone just really just getting into fitness, still intimidated by going to the gym, we're talking very early days here. This kind of simple strategy is that one that helps build that confidence and just celebrating the win that you've rocked up to the gym. So even if you don't have access to, apps or spreadsheets, or let's say we're not really into tracking and measuring yet, by default, you kind of are, because you've got that visual aid that you're using right there. But I know even with myself, and I do this with clients as well, it might be just getting one of the yearly planners and, putting it on the wall and then just doing a cross over the days that you go to do your training session. Because, I still do things like that on my wall here in the office, and it builds, you see that momentum and you just want to do more and more. You know what I mean? Yeah. Going back to the to-do lists, and there's a couple of things. I live and die by my calendar, by Google Cal. You know what I mean? I love being that, and then we can get into how that helps later on as well. But I still have a hardback diary, okay, that I actually like to use. I've tried using digital versions of this in other things. There you go. And the reason I like it is I just like the way that I tick off things. You know, I either put, like, I write it down and then I might put an empty box next to it that I get to tick, or I have an orange highlighter, which for some reason I prefer to highlight through the task that's done to give it that like really strong color, rather than just striking it through with a pen. And I go through the day, and like you and I probably sort of work in chunks, that we sort of devote to it, and try and stay on topic as much rather than multitasking, and just kind of get through that to-do list. But this is some of the behaviors that we know. They're keystone habits that like allow the rest of the day.
Exactly, man. I think like the strategy that you talked about was the Seinfeld strategy, right? Like Jerry Seinfeld made that whole strategy up around, he wanted to become the best comedian in the world, right? And he became like the highest paid comedian at one stage. And obviously Seinfeld is crazy. The amount of money that show produced. All he did is like, he knows that if I want to become the best, I need to write a brand new joke every single day. And he had the whole yearly planner across the wall. And every day he said, I'm going to write a joke. And it doesn't have to be the best joke, it's just a joke. And this is the same thing. You don't have to do the best training session, you just have to do a training session or something that moves you forward in that session. So with this, he wrote a joke and he put an X on it. And his goal was to start with is just to do an X as many days as he can. And he actually made this sort of pact with himself. If I miss a day, I'll never miss 2 days in a row. And what he'll also do is I'll create a streak, right? So he might do like 7 jokes in a row or 7 days in a row, might do 14 days in a row. And if he breaks the chain, then his goal, he would try and gamify it, that he would try and make the next chain longer than the chain he was currently focused on. So he would just keep trying to increase the links in the chain to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we can do this for sleep, or we can do this for eating 4 fists of vegetables on a daily basis, like these don't have to be crazy goals, guys. Like, and when I say training, I was listening to Ben Pakulski, and I really liked his philosophy around training. The training doesn't have to be you going to the gym and doing 100 burpees or smashing out some squats and bench press. You can train as far as like either energy system, right? So you can train your parasympathetic or sympathetic energy system. So you training on a Sunday doesn't mean you have to go for a 10-kilometer run. You training on a Sunday could be you sitting there and doing some foam rolling, or doing some mobility, or you like doing some meditation, and you just focus on that style of training. But if we say I'm going to train 7 days a week, and a minimum of 3 of them is shifting weights in the gym, and I can have 4 of them that I can manipulate throughout that week, where I can do some other energy system training, it could only be like 5 minutes. And you make this habit so easy to actually accomplish that all of a sudden it's like I'm winning. And with winning, it's like you increase that 5 minutes to 6 minutes to 7 minutes to 8 minutes. And as you get that habit formation, you can increase the challenge based on that habit, and then you can all of a sudden get momentum.
Yeah, like one of the exercises I do with most clients, and it's become a little bit of a joke because I like to guess the outcomes that are coming from this. But it's, show me your weekly schedule and I'll show you where you miss meals. I'll show you when you eat wrong. I'll show you when you feel like shit. I'll show you when you don't sleep well. Because like when you see the map of how someone spends their time across the course of the week, for someone who's been doing this for a while, we know when there's going to be issues, right? And it's about like looking at like the amount of energy you have as a person, where you devote your time and energy, those resources that you have, and how you can best optimize your week to then go on and achieve your goals. And I can briefly talk about something that, since, my son's been born, he's nearly 9 weeks old now. It's been pretty tough. You've been helping me out with some fatherly advice, telling me to just stick it out for a couple of years. But look, in essence, I've had to do some things for myself here. Like one of those things was, on Mondays, I do a lot of phone calls. They're probably about 30 plus phone calls on a Monday. And so just that's a very mentally demanding day for me. And so the training session that follows, it can't be a deadlift session. It can't be something that's incredibly neurally demanding again. I basically go in and I do like a rehab session targeted towards my shoulder health, which I've got a bit of an issue with. And again, it's just getting to the gym. Okay. One of the other things that my wife and I, sort of figured out was we were just having a lot of decision fatigue towards the end of the night because, we're very underslept some nights. And what was happening was I was forgetting to, let's say, defrost the meat. Okay. Or what would happen was, and I actually wrote this down because this was funny when I wrote it down, I just realized this is like, if we ran out of cucumbers, Travis, we wouldn't make a salad. So cucumbers is the linchpin of salad eating for dinners in my house somehow. Zoe and I both love like a tomato and cucumber salad, and for some reason the cucumbers go off a little bit quicker than the tomatoes, and all of a sudden there would be no cucumbers, and so we wouldn't make a salad. How crazy is that, right? But it wasn't until you write these things down, you just recognize these cues, these triggers about where things can go wrong. And so I said to my wife, I'm like, look, I know you don't like this, because she loves her food and she loves to have like free access to food. But like, let's face it, she was very much up to my solution because we're both tired and making poor decisions. And that was, let's have a night of the week for each meal. Okay. So like Monday nights is, pasta night, Tuesday nights is like chicken schnitzels or beef burgers, like homemade night. Wednesday nights is sushi night and those kind of things. And what that did was again, we didn't have to make any decision towards the end of the night. We knew what it was going to be from the day. It also lended itself well to me going to the freezer and defrosting anything that morning that had to be ready for the night. And also because I know exactly what's that I have to get ready, is that if I had to do a trip past the grocer or the supermarket on the way home to get cucumbers, that would be done. So the meal was made, and it took our like nutrition, to another level, like really back on track. You know what I mean? So and I've done that exercise with clients before. I'm like, hey, I want, you and your partner to share a calendar. I want you to have recurring things in there so that you can both recognize where, your tasks are. And it almost gives you an appreciation for what each partner does in the relationship and, where their time and effort is as well. So
yeah, man, I do exactly the same thing in our house, right? We have each night of the week, there's a different meal. So we don't eat the same stuff, but it all sits inside our nutrition plan. And that's the difference between like reactive discipline and structural discipline, right? Like, when you're trying to create a habit, you want to try and not rely on willpower as much as possible until that habit is like some form of, subconscious or unconscious thing. It's like, because if we're relying on willpower, we often, when we're stressed or when we have decision fatigue towards the end of the day, which we all do because there's so many decisions you make before 5 o'clock, you revert back to the lesser version of yourself, or you revert back to the old identity. And remember, we're trying to change your identity with this habit formation, right? So especially everyone listening, if you're used to eating, takeout and Uber Eats every single night, then you need to create structural discipline and not rely on reactive discipline. So it's like comes to 5 o'clock and you're like, oh, what do you want to eat tonight? So if you rely on reactive discipline, you will start choosing worse choices. If you have structural discipline where it's like, hey, I'm having this on Mondays, this on Tuesdays, this on Wednesdays, all of a sudden there's structure, and you don't even have to rely on willpower to actually follow through with your habit anymore. It is the structure. You've already created it. And they talk about this as far as like implementation intentions, right? They did studies on this, and having an implementation intention, whereas I eat steak and potatoes at my house on Monday nights at 6:30. Like if you write that, you've given a plan. This is why I like physical diaries, right? You've given a place where this meal lives in the world. And it's not even like, you're not even saying it, you're not even thinking, you've written it down, you've created a place for it to live. And they did a study around 3 different groups, right? There was a group that they were told to exercise. There were a group who got given a motivation video and were told to exercise over 12 weeks. And there was a group who actually given the motivation video, they were told to exercise, and they created this implementation intentions where they wrote down, I will exercise at X gym at X time on X day, and they wrote down Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, the group who were given the motivational video and were just told to exercise, even though they were more motivated and they were told like all the benefits of exercise, they actually exercised the same. The group who did the implementation intentions, they exercised 31% more over the 12 weeks just because they gave that habit a place in the world to live with that implementation intention. So if you can do this around your nutrition, if you can do this around your training, this is structural discipline, not relying on reactive discipline. So you don't have to rely on willpower to get you through, because willpower is finite. right? It's also infinite. You can build it, but it's finite because when you use it up, it's like an iPhone battery. You need to replenish it again. And most of us in society are really sucky at doing that.
Trav, I've got to ask you, is the greatest deception that fitness influencers, right, have ever done is that it is grit and willpower, okay, that got them their success, right? Because in the eyes of the general population, it is, okay? So, you know, average Joe sits back there, he's 15 kilos overweight, he's scrolling through his Instagram, he's following all the jacked six-pack guys going, man, like, this guy's just got so much discipline, like so much self-control. Like, I just don't have an identity like that. And, you know, it's really this negative judgment. What the reality of it is, okay, the people that seem to have the best self-control are the best architects of their environment. They create, and James Clear points this out very well in his book, Atomic Habits, they create their environment to the point where they barely have to exert that self-control.
Yeah.
That's where the war is won. Okay. It is one of the greatest misconceptions that I see when I see the average Joe and Jane, like looking at their influencers on social media. And it really begs the question for me sometimes about whether or not they should be following some of these people that, you know, until they've raised to a level where they can identify where they're at and what's appropriate for them to be focusing on. Because it's just, as you and I both know, like, we have a good level of self-control, but we don't put ourselves in situations where we're exposed and we're vulnerable. It's not obsessive to do that. This is the other thing, that the counter argument that people will make, mostly by people who don't have that like ability to architect their environment, I might add, is that to do so is just, you can't even go out with your friends anymore, or you can't even go to that work function, or, you know, they point out like that it's a negative strategy to do so. But I would very much err on the other side of like, really what you're looking for. If you have a tribe or a group or an environment that are, you know, always, you know, you go out, you drink too much alcohol with them, you go out to really bad, you know, like restaurants where you overeat like that. You're always more willing to have the habits of the group that you're with. And this is why, and this comes back to, I think, our first podcast where I think we talked about nutrition tribes, is this is the attraction of a tribe. And this is also one of the pros of joining a tribe, if it's the right tribe for the right reasons, is that you can take on the collective praise that comes from having those attributes and habits that are adhered to by the group.
Man, like what you're saying there is 100%. I agree with, obviously. Like when we're looking at you are the sum of the five people, that's everything, right? Like, you know, I think there was another study where it's like, if you live within 50 kilometers of a friend who's obese, you are over 50% likely to be obese as well. And it's not because the fact that there's a couple of things that could come in play with that. They could be a trigger when you catch up, that you guys always overeat or you guys always knock back too many drinks. But also they make you feel like it's okay to be that. So if you come back to always your motivation, your why, if your why is big enough and you've decided to go all in on this, then you have to stop worrying about, because then they'll also probably go, oh, you're being obsessed. Like, just chill out. It's okay to have the donut or the 17 drinks or whatever it is. It's like, no, if you have to go back to your why and you have to go, no, I'm doing this for me. And it doesn't mean you have to cut this person out of your life completely, but the trigger could be, I catch up with Sally on Saturday mornings and we do it at brunch, and that ends up being like 3 mimosas and all the rest of it that happens. And all of a sudden that trigger there, that is the catalyst for you to having a really shit nutrition weekend. So instead, you might not want to cut Sally out of your life because, you know, as ruthless as I am, I just cut her. But like, you might go, I'm going to meet Sally. Yeah. But you might go, I'm going to meet Sally at the beach and we're going to go for a walk, because it doesn't give you ability.
Yeah. I'm at 100%. You just went where I was going to take it if you didn't. And that's exactly right. So again, it's that architect of environment type thing. So again, what I will see through working with clients is often the ones that will express these situations, meaning, hey, look, it's Friday afternoon drinks, like this is where we go as a group or whatever it is. It's kind of like they're not overtly blaming, but these people are often not the organizers of the group. So they're not the social butterfly that organizes the situation. Does that make sense? So they're at the behest of, what everyone else does.
Yeah, but then if that happens, you can create these bright lines around that as like if then situations. So it's like if I go out on a Friday night, then okay, so it's if this happens, then this happens. So if I go out on a Friday night with my workmates, then I will have a maximum of 2 drinks. Right. So you've created a bright line. So there's not even so you've created structural discipline around it again. If I miss the gym, then I will go for a 2-kilometer walk. It's whatever you can create around your habit. Like if I press snooze, then I go to the gym in the afternoon. Or if I miss the gym in the morning, then I'll do 100 burpees. You create this if, then, when scenarios or if, when, then scenarios. All of a sudden, you're still maintaining your structure inside your life. And this sort of breaks the all or nothing mentality, because this is the problem, right? Like society in general is all or nothing. We know that if you are following a nutrition plan, and because after coaching for the last 17 years, like if I give someone a nutrition plan, they stuff it up on the Thursday. They generally we talked about in the other podcast, they puncture one time, they go and puncture all the other tires. And they're like, I'm going to start again on Monday. And they end up eating like 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day for the next 3 days, pushing them back 2 steps. But instead, you can have these if, when, then scenarios. If when I stuff up and I overeat today, then my next meal will be 100% on point. If I go out with my people on Friday night, then I will have a maximum of 2 drinks. If I miss the gym in the morning, then I'll make sure I hit 10,000 steps throughout the day. Like creating these scenarios, and most of us, when we're trying to create habits, should have about 7 to 8 scenarios that you're going to be sabotaged around, and you already have the answer to the sabotaging situation before it arises. So now you've already overcome the obstacle before it happens. So you have more confidence, you have more belief, and you have more trust in yourself, which then will build more momentum. And then all of a sudden, you're not identifying as the guy or girl who gets wasted on Friday nights, because that's an identity as well. You actually and over time, you start to identify as the person who is, I don't want to get wasted on Friday nights because I really want to train on Saturday morning because it actually makes me feel good. And I think that is the other thing that we were looking at, habit formation. It's not looking at, okay, the feel-good scenario in 24 weeks. It's like, by sleeping 7 hours a night, or sleeping, that's my goal. Okay, let's say everyone else, sleeping 8 hours a night, like when I wake up at 8 hours, like I actually feel good and rested in the morning. Like, so you're feeling good in that moment straight after the habit actually formed. You're not doing it because in 12 weeks time. So when you're trying to create these habits, it's also having some attachment of feeling good in the moment that pushes you forward as well.
Yeah. I'll give an example or so of the most popular video that I ever put on Facebook, I think was in 2017. And then I'll give you some current things that I've changed over the last couple of months. So in 2017, I was prepping for a bodybuilding show, and I was living in a very small unit, like really small, in Albert Park. Location amazing. The actual place was terrible. No kitchen, basically. And for a guy needing to cook up as much food as I needed to, it was a disaster because even at its cleanest, that kitchen looked crappy. It was a really bad kitchen. So what did I do? I bought a barbecue and I put it out on the balcony and I cooked all my food out there. Now, where the video came in is I basically didn't want to have Tupperware containers that I'd have to be hand washing. I was like, no way, I'm not like hand washing that many containers a week and everything else. So I just used sandwich bags to put all of my salads and vegetables in. And I basically talked through a 2-minute video, Jamie Oliver style, rustic, chopping up a carrot and throwing it in. And then I just had the whole week prepared basically within 2 minutes of this video. And I literally got so many messages from mainly guys saying, dude, like that is the best like strategy, because they just hated cleaning. So that was their friction to like meal prepping. It wasn't actually cooking the meals. It was just the whole cleaning aspect of it. And one of the things that you're trying to do when you're looking at these habits is like from a cue perspective, it's about making, you know, it more obvious or less obvious if it's a bad habit that you have that you're trying to remedy. And from like a response perspective, it's about removing any friction. So what is it that stops you from doing that? How can you make this easier? Now, I don't do that anymore because I have an amazing kitchen now. Okay, but at the time, it made my life so much easier, and it really resonated with a lot of people that watched that video. Okay, fast forward current times. Coming back from a big layoff, I had to put on a lot of size that went missing somewhere. Okay, so I would go to a cafe with Zoe. One of our friends owns it, and I would get this eggs Benedict with double eggs, double sauce, and double potato rosties. I think it's like 6 rosties or something like that. This is a whopping great amount of calories, right? So it was fantastic in my goal to put on size. Not so great when I've hit that size and I need to trim the fat, right? But as happens, and anyone who's got a decent amount of muscle and eats a lot of food, who goes out and enjoys food, will realize that you get remembered like quite easily. Like people, they laugh at it. The chefs know you. They point it out. The waiters just they always remember your meal. So you don't even have to do the whole ordering thing anymore. You feel like a valued customer because let's face it, you pay more than anyone else. So you are a customer. So the thing is this. I always have found that social situation not awkward, but I just am a bit of a, it's hard for me to go back from that. Okay. Once I've established myself as Big Benny eating big breakfast. So what I do is I just change cafes.
I 100% agree.
So that I don't have to sit there and explain the whole, oh no, I'm not bulking anymore. I'm trying to lose some fat. So I basically have gone to a new cafe. That's our Saturday morning breakfast. It's probably about half the calories. And I haven't dragged along this whole history of like, well, why aren't you eating what you used to eat, and having that whole conversation again.
Man, it's so interesting, right? Like, again, we're talking about architecting your environment. Like, when we're looking at trying to break bad habits, like your shopping, like at the grocery store could be one of your worst habits, right? Because if you always go to the same Coles, you know where the chocolate bars are, you know where the ice cream is, you know where the foods that you love to eat, that you tend to indulge with is. So the best thing you can do when you're going shopping as well is just, okay, right now from scratch, I am starting to shop a new shopping. I'm going to the Woolworths or the IGA or the local farmers market. Now, if you do that and you go from now on, whenever I step into the doors of this shopping center, like my identity is I only buy stuff that is on my meal plan. I cannot buy anything else inside this shop. Okay, I only buy things that are going to take me towards the best version of myself in here. And it's like your new sanctuary. Like this is the new Coles. And now all of a sudden your identity inside that Coles is a different identity. Okay, so now we don't even have to worry about not buying the chocolate because you have an identity inside that that store. Now, with this, when we're trying to break bad habits, and then like you sort of alluded to it, then it's like a habit you just change the cafe. But some people don't even know where their bad habits are. And you can create this thing called a note card system, right? And I really like this because anyone's trying to transform their life right now, trust me, guys, like, you know, you're going to slip up, you're going to stumble. Like that is a part and parcel to the whole thing. Like, because you're creating a new identity, you grab these note cards and you can chuck them in your pocket. And it's like on the note card, you have like who, what, where, and when. Okay. So when you create a bad habit, you write down who were you with? Okay. What were you doing? And what were you doing straight before it happened? So like what happened just before this bad habit actually instigated? Where were you? Okay, so that cafe, for example, and when was it? Maybe it's like on Saturday mornings, and like, or like what time of day? When was it inside your life? So if we can go who, what, where, and when, and over the space of over a couple of weeks, I start to identify the trigger points that create these bad habits with the note card system. Only when we can identify the triggers, who they are, what they are, where they are, and when they are, then we can start to even remove the triggers altogether from our life and architect that environment that you talked about. So we don't even have to use any type of willpower around that person at that environment in that location when that normally happens. Or we know that if we can't take it out of our environment, we know that actually a bad habit normally precedes that situation. So we can create that structural discipline of if, then, when, or if, when, then. And all of a sudden, we know that I go out for Saturday mornings. So from now on, all I'm going to have is 2 eggs on toast with a tablespoon of butter. I'm not allowed to eat anything else when I go out for breakfast on Saturday mornings with my partner for the next 12 weeks. So now it's not even a decision. You don't even have to go through the menu.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. It's far easy to change those habits in a new environment. You know what I mean? And this is, I remember when you first came and got me when I was back in supplement stores, and, you were just starting, I think you were a year in with RBT, and you're like, hey, can you come down and do the transformation seminar? I think I've got like 90 or 100 people. They're going to be there. I could do it myself, but honestly, I just, I want you to come in, and that way I can kind of like set it up, and we'll go from there. And I think I'd been training there a little bit like prior to that. And so I got such a good vibe from the place. And like one of the things was like, man, every time I walk in here, like there's just so much like high fives and everyone's happy. And there's just like the culture was just amazing. And I'm just so big on culture. I was like, wow, I don't do the group training sessions myself, but actually just sitting back and watching it was really amazing. And then when I delivered that very first seminar down there when the grass was green, remember, it was like half the gym. I remember it was on nutrition, but I kept talking about culture because I was like, a lot of you are new here tonight. You know what I mean? I know it's your first week, but let me tell you something as an outsider looking in on this process is like, I couldn't recommend anyone who's new to this come to a better environment, because environment is king. You're going to have friends out there who they're not going to like the new lean you. You know what I mean? Because it's going to mean you've got a different set of behaviors. You've got a different set of habits. You've got a new identity, and that's confronting. And it's going to mean that you don't do things with them that you used to do with them. Same thing goes for work. In fact, work's usually worse, especially for people that are in offices or that kind of thing. It's usually even worse. But what you're going to get here is you guys are going to make friends. And mate, how many friendships, how many weddings and stuff have we seen at those in the last 7 years? And that really comes down to the power of a good group, the power of a good tribe.
Well, man, like, again, it's like immersion, right? So you're immersing yourself in a culture that is headed in the same common route as yourself. So you can go it alone if you want, but you're not as strong. Like the wolf is only as strong as the pack, and the pack is only as strong as the wolf. Look at this. Like if you want to learn a new language, like you would go the fastest way to learn the language. Say I want to learn Chinese, I'll move to China and I'll immerse myself in the culture and I'll pick up the language faster. If I look at this as well, if I was born in China, like my first language probably would be Chinese as well. So it's like, if you were born in an overweight family, your first language on health is to be overweight, and that is the habits you're born with. So that's a very hard identity to shift. So the only way to truly shift that identity is to immerse yourself in a culture that is different. So it's, moving to that country that speaks the language that you want to speak. And it's moving to that gym or moving to that location that speaks the health language that you want to speak. And now, again, you will stumble at the start of speaking that health language, but being around that environment where it continues to push you in the right direction, all of a sudden you'll start picking up the language, and in time you'll start speaking it fluently, which is essentially habit creation on a health transformation journey, being around a culture that, yes, you will stumble, you keep going in the right direction, and over time, all of a sudden, you are that health language, you are that health culture, and you're bringing other people along now. And that is, again, architecting your environment for success. It's being around those people that pull you in the right direction, because that's where you're going to be the strongest.
Yeah. And look, you just reminded me of on my, what's it called? A cover photo for my Facebook profile, right? Like the thing that sits behind your profile picture. It's a Robin Sharma quote. Okay. And it says, I think, your behaviors follow your beliefs. Okay. And at the time, that's a great quote. But what I realized is I'd come to sort of explain things to clients and friends and things, like it was almost like this top-down hierarchy. Look, and identity is here, and you're going to do what is in in line with your identity. What I like about our friend James Clear, who we've referenced a couple of times now, and everyone should go listen to his audiobook or get his courses because he is an absolute master. He's really picked up where Charles Duhigg left off with the power of habit. But one of the things James points out is this, and I like this. He says, every action you take is a vote to become the identity of who you want to be.
Yep.
And that's really powerful because that, to me, like when I remember hearing that, I don't know when his book came out, it's like a year and a half ago. And I had this kind of like big one-way arrow going from identity to behavior. And then I was like, boom, paradigm shift. This is a two-way road. You know what I mean? What's probably more important is that you get the identity by doing the thing.
Yeah. Well, you don't get the same as like, you don't get the motivation before you, I'm not motivated to train today. No one has ever started a session 5 minutes, 10 minutes in and go, I don't want to train anymore. Like when you start training, you feel like training, right? Like sometimes you want to feel like it beforehand, but when you start training, like you start doing it. When you start the behavior, you get the identity. It normally doesn't happen the other way around. You can't just say, I want to be that. But with this, I think there's a couple of crucial things, man. Like I think there's a kryptonite habit and there's a keystone habit. And I think like so many of us are looking at, far out, man. Like the kryptonite habit we'll talk about first. When we look at Superman, right? The closer and closer he got to the kryptonite, the weaker and weaker he became as a person. If you look at the more and more you do this kryptonite habit, the more unhealthy you become. So like if my kryptonite habit is I go out for drinks every Friday night and that's the catalyst to having a really shit weekend. If I do this and I fast forward over the next 5 years and I do this same habit for 5 years straight, who am I in 5 years? Well, I'm probably more unhealthy, more tired, more energy deprived, and a lesser version of me. Now, everyone has different kryptonite habits, right? It could be like being stressed throughout the day and knocking back a bottle of wine. If you drink a bottle of wine every night for the next 5 years, it's another kryptonite habit. Like if you can identify your kryptonite habit and we can remove that habit for the next 5 years, cascading over that 5 years, all of a sudden who you're going to become. It's not always the to-do list that people need to focus on. It's the not to-do list that actually will give them the result. Now, another thing, keystone habit. So if we look at this one keystone habit, we talked about this, like my keystone habit is training. I train mostly like first thing in the morning. Why? Because if I train, then I eat well, then I have more energy, then I sleep well. Like that, if I don't train, I am more prone to actually overeating and not sleeping and all the rest of it. So it's like, that's the one habit, it's the catalyst habit for me that actually pulls all my other habits together. Now, and then if I look at this, if I put this keystone habit in place today, and I do this every single day for the next 5 years, for the next 1,800 days. Remember, again, training isn't running 10 kilometers every single day, guys. Like training for me is just like either parasympathetic or sympathetic activity. That is lifting weights and doing some conditioning, or it is making sure I'm getting my recovery training in as well. So if I do this every day for the next 5 years, I'm 1,800 days in. Who am I? Like, who am I if I just do this one habit? Well, I am 100% a healthier version of myself. I am a fitter person. I have more energy. That's like, cool. I'm going to make sure I put this keystone habit in. I'm going to make sure I remove this kryptonite habit. If I just did those two things, those are the catalysts for change, for making me the best version of myself, not in 12 weeks. Because, yeah, everyone can transform in 12 weeks. And if you never actually implemented habits, you got just really David Goggins and you disciplined yourself for sacrifice and you blew out, right? It happens with competitors all the time, right? Like they just completely blow out because they don't have the habits around it as well. Plus a lot of the stuff as well. But like they never really had those habits. And we see when Gen Pop comes into the gym, they do a 16-week transformation. Then all of a sudden they revert back to their old identity. But if I go, no, we always overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what we can achieve in 5. If I cascade this over the next 5 years on who I'm going to become, and that's truly my why, man, I just have to focus on 2 habits. That's for me. Now, like for everyone else listening, like what is your kryptonite habit if you took out for the next 5 years? And what is your keystone habit that you put in for the next 5 years? And who do you become? Like how exciting is that?
100%, man. And you just sort of a while back you did something that just reminded me is that like, you're talking about competitors and like, falling off the bandwagon after, all the routine and stuff is out the window and the event is said and done. is that, this is one thing that I think is really important when people go in to do a timed challenge. So like maybe that's what gets you to the gym. Okay. Maybe it's the 28 days, the 21 days, the 16 weeks, whatever it is. Right. But in essence, you have to realize that you don't want to just be the person that just dropped 10 kilos. Okay. You want to be the person who trains, is fit, is healthy, and feels good. Okay. And when you're in an environment for a select period of time, this is why I have my reservations about, just going away. Like, when people do like detoxes and stuff like that, and they get like trapped in a rehab house or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a completely artificial environment where if you don't have a set of strategies to implement immediately after that to engineer your own environment to kind of have the same benefits, then all of a sudden you're around all these existing cues and cravings that kind of got you where you were in the first place. Okay, so if you come and join like a group training facility, you get amazing results while you're there. What happens when you leave? Okay, especially if it's something it has only been a relatively short period of time, so like a 12 or 16 week thing. It's something that your results are best while you're in that group, in that tribe, and they're going to continue. Like when you lose that, you've got to be ready for it.
Yeah, man, like I'm going to like bastardize this thing that I read, but, they were talking about heroin addiction, I'm pretty sure. And when people were coming back from, what was it in the 70s? Like one of the wars in the 70s, right?
James? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was actually where, he was saying that up until that point, they were thinking heroin addiction, is what it was. And then they discovered that up to 20 to 30% of the American soldiers had either had an addiction or not. And then when they brought them back to the States, literally only 5% of the ones that were addicted, had the addiction
again. Yeah. So 95% recovered when they got taken out of the environment where the heroin was. So like the environment dictated the heroin addiction, not the heroin itself. When they looked at the people who were addicted to heroin who actually were in the United States, they had a 90% re-addiction rate. So they stayed inside that environment. So they got re-addicted because the environment and probably the people and the cues and the what and the when and everything we talked about. But they took those people out of where they were situated when that war was going on, and 95% recovered. So, man, like if that isn't in itself, your environment dictates your behavior, like nothing else can happen, guys. So I think you have to understand it's like your environment is one of the most crucial things. Like we can't understand, like press that point any further.
Mate, if we wanted to make a really silly meathead comment here, like we could sort of say, hey, like, the way to solve obesity would be to throw someone in a country where there's just no food and no money. You know what I mean? It's like literally, like we are in, a lot of us are in, countries of affluence, and we're surrounded by, this very easy access to a lot of food, and we don't have to, spend a lot of energy to get it. But it also leads us to another conversation, which I don't mean this to create any controversy, so don't think that's why I'm doing it, but I hear a lot of individuals talking about, thinking that they have an eating disorder, okay, without having seen a professional and had it looked into and that kind of thing. And it's something I'm always very wary of listening for any of these insights when I might start working with someone or anything like that. But one of the things is I think the lines are getting blurred here between the strict definition of eating disorders and, again, just being around these environments, which, our biology and our habits are all dictated towards overeating. And then, once you're not around those environments anymore, it's actually very, very easy not to overconsume, not to spend a lot of time thinking about it, and not to really fall into some of the classifications that a stereotypical eating disorder has. So I think that's just something I wanted to just touch on really briefly, because I know that there's, again, a lot of people on Dr. Google, you know what I mean? And they'll just jump on there and kind of go, oh my God, I have this eating disorder and this and that. But I just think that, I hope people can see the 30,000 foot view of what we're really talking about here, and that your environment is, you are a product of your environment.
Well, people say to me like all the time, right? Like, because I ask questions in online fitness that we still run and all the rest of it. I'm like, "What's your problem?" And they're like, I'm addicted to sugar, or I'm addicted to binge eating." Like, they literally think they're addicted to binge eating. And I was like, okay, like, no, let's look at your environment. Like, some of these people, like, again, it's taking the food out of your house, so it's architecting your environment. It's deleting the apps off your phone that makes it easy to get. Because it's like, whenever I try and get anyone to transform their life, like, I would say delete Deliveroo, delete Uber Eats. Like, you need to delete these apps off your phone, because it makes it so easy to sit on your ass, get shit delivered to your house, and then go back into the old version of yourself when you're tired, when you're emotional. Like, everyone gets tired and emotional, guys. You're human, right? And everyone, it's not you saying you're a binge eater. Every single person, like, when we are stressed and tired, we want to feel good. Okay, we grew up with, okay, you did a good job, here's a reward, and we reward our kids with ice cream, right? Like, you've been taught this behavior, and so when you feel tired, you still want that reward. You've been taught this behavior that's been ingrained into you since you're like 3 years old. So you don't have, essentially, not everyone, but essentially don't all have like a binge eating problem. You're just a human that needs to architect your environment and take out the things that makes it so easy to do that binge eating, right? Like, and for me, man, like, I like eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia. Like, I went, one of my exes, like back in the day, like, I went to a year of meetings, like 1 year, once a week, every single week, talking about this. And I think we'll talk about this on a future podcast. So I am not saying there isn't issues out there. There definitely is issues out there. But I think a lot of people say they have an issue when they don't, when they just need to architect their environment up for success. And they probably need more connection with society, which gives them a bit more fulfillment and happiness rather than loneliness. And that in itself will get you feeling good, understanding that when you are tired and you are emotional, you will want to eat these foods. Like, that's just normal. That's human. So I think it's understanding these things. And again, man, far out. They did another study, man. Like, I don't want to, like, just random studies that actually work into effect of the transformation. That when these kids were going through college, right? And they had these kids going through college, and one group, they just, essentially they did a study on like, how was school and how do you think you'll perform in college. And another group, what they did is they sat down with them for 2 hours and they watched a video on how college is going to be tough, how they're going to stumble, how there's going to be sacrifice, how you're going to fail with exams, but then you'll learn more and you'll win. The kids that actually watched the 2 hour seminar as well before they started college, they went on to becoming more successful. I think it was like a 20% more increase in their average wage they earned. But the reason why this happened, and this is what I think should happen in all gyms, is you should, at the very start, have an interview of some people who actually created lasting change and them talking about how it's actually going to be tough. You will fall over. There will need to be sacrifice. And if people can understand that it is human to stumble and then to get back up on your feet, I think that's what creates the ability. It's like, because we have these stories going on our head, like when you stuff on a diet, it's like, oh, I always stuff up on diets. I always stuff up on diets. And then you do, and it's like, I can never lose weight. I can never lose weight. And we tell ourselves these stories. But if we understand that you will probably stuff up, but the best thing for you to do is get right back on track. And people who have stuffed up and got back on track actually got the result in the end. And it's allowing yourself, it's okay if you stuff up, but you need to get back on track is the crucial thing to actually implementing these habits.
Yeah, I think you've just reminded me of something else, as you always do. How often do we hear, I've tried everything?
Yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, as soon as you and I hear that, we're like, ding, 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 ding. We know where we need to hear this conversation, right? Because that's, it's kind of like an identity statement in myself that I've given up on myself. I've done everything. There's nothing left for me to do. Like, it's my genetics. It's whatever it is. I have something physiologically wrong with me, blah, blah, blah. But as you and I would both sort of steer the conversation towards is like, if someone has poor sleep hygiene, if someone, you would be like, well, you know what? You need to start with a clean slate. I know this hurts because you've tried for 10 years and you're not any further forwards than you were 10 years ago. Maybe you're further backwards. And all this intent, all this effort with no reward, so no return on this effort, is extremely frustrating. But there are some pillars of health and behaviors that you just have not addressed, which have given your results a mere glimpse of potential, okay, that you could have achieved. And until we focus on, you getting to 7 and 8 hours sleep a night, you can't even assess yourself that you can't get results, right? And this comes back to, we've done the podcast on tracking, and some people are so against tracking, right? Because maybe they did it for a little while and then, it was too hard and they gave it up and whatever. So they build up this thing against it. And it's often the thing that we build up that harshest resistance to the most, okay, to gain that clarity and the right sense of direction.
Man, I completely agree. I think, I did a post the other day about discipline equals freedom, right? Like, looking at the whole Jocko Willing thing, like the tracking, the ability to track your calories or track your foods or whatever it is, but even talking about tracking calories, the discipline of tracking calories, it's not obsession. It gives you the freedom to understand how much you should be eating to get the result, and also gives you the freedom to maybe fit some ice cream in there. So you feel like you aren't on this thing or this sacrificial diet and I only eat chicken and broccoli, essentially discipline equals freedom. And I think we have to understand that. It's like, the discipline of going to the gym gives you the freedom of, having longevity inside your life, or gives you time. Discipline, going to the gym gives you time, doesn't take you time because you have more energy.
And this, by the way, is how all diets work. Okay, they're all doing the same thing, which is creating a way or a method in which you're achieving this calorie deficit, like we talked about in the previous podcast, through a set of boundaries, rules, guidelines, whatever it is that allows you to adhere with consistency. Yeah. So if it's, whatever it's eliminating, all it's doing is it's leading you to a level of consistency to eating what you should. And so, again, I'd like to point this out because this is something I see on social media all the time, and general population people get confused thinking that they shouldn't have to track because someone they look up to doesn't seem to track anything, or they show them eating this huge cheat meal on a Saturday night, but she has a six-pack and whatever it is, right? More often than not, the people that are in that position, again, it leads us back to they are the best architects of their environment, okay? Yeah. They are the ones that have put into place these little 1% action steps and stack them up year on year on year, right? So you imagine that you have done what you need to now go and do, these little 1% action steps for 3 to 4 years. Do you know what that gets you after that? It gets you a level of freedom that came from the discipline that you were just talking about.
Oh, dude, for me, I think I structure my day. Everything's structured for me, right? I'm a very structured and consistent human, but one, I wasn't drinking enough water. So what I got is I got a 2-liter bottle and I have it sitting on my desk to make sure I get through 2 liters. I wake up in the morning and I have a big glass of water, about half a liter when I first wake up. And I have 2 liters before I leave. And I sit at my desk for 7 hours of the day. When I was a trainer, it was different. I'll talk about something else in a second, but this gives me 2 liters during the day, and I have at least a 500 mils at night before dinner. So all of a sudden, I've got my 3 liters, and it's structure. I create structure of buying this here, create my environment. It's in my desk. I have to finish this before I leave work, and all of a sudden, now I've got structure. I'm getting 3 liters a day. When we look at this again, it comes down to my neat activity or my daily steps. When I was a personal trainer, I'm still a personal trainer, but when I was actually doing a lot of the training sessions, I walk 20 to 25,000 steps a day. Now, if I can transition that into today, it's very easy for me to walk 1,500 steps in a day, which is crazy. Very crazy. But I've structured my day where every 90 minutes, what I'll do is there will be a little alarm go off on my phone, and I'll get up and I'll walk a couple of 100 steps. I'll actually walk for 5 minutes. And by the end of the day, I've always hit a minimum of about 6,000 steps before I go home. because I go for 4 walks during the day. And again, what that gives me is it gives me one, energy management, because going for a walk increases my energy and productivity. I get my step count in, so I'm moving more. My body is moving out of sedentary activity. And I actually bought a mini tramp as well the other day. And like I do that like every 30 to 60 minutes. And I just like, it changes my state because, you know, motion creates emotion. But like for me, like talk about structure, like I structure my walks in during the day. And people might be thinking of this and they go, oh man, that's next level. I can't do that. And it's like, I need to create structure. If not, I will walk 1,500 steps in a day. Like that would just be me. So I need to actually have the structured discipline. And it's not like, oh, I'll go for a couple of walks throughout the day, because that's reactive discipline. If I create structured discipline, it's different.
Yeah. So can I ask you something? Because this leads me to some of the other things that, you know, James Clear talks about is like, did you stack that habit of like creating that walking with something else? Or did you, so something you were previously doing, like listening to a podcast, for instance, and then, okay, I'm going to do this while walking? Or did you temptation bundle it? Do you know what I mean? Did you go, right, I'm going to go for this walk, and as a reward, I'm going to, you know, something else? Did you do something to grease that a bit?
Honestly, bro, like for me, because my days are a little bit different, I actually have, my trigger is an alarm on my phone. So I have an alarm that goes off. And I work in 90-minute time blocks. So I work for 90 minutes, and every 2 hours, and I'll fuck around, but every 2 hours, the alarm goes off throughout the day. So I get my 4 walks in during the day. My walk number 1 is before I even start work. So when we have this, and when we're looking at habits, and what you were saying is like anchor points, right? So we have anchor points inside our days that then will list a bunch of habits that happen after that. So an anchor point is when you wake up. Now, there is a list of activities that happen when everyone wakes up. And everyone's activity is different. Depends on what your identity is. You could wake up and you could shower. You might not shower. I don't know. You could brush your teeth. You could put clothes on. You can eat a muffin. You can eat toast. You can intermittent fast. Like whatever your habit stacking is, the list of tasks after that anchor point, that's totally up to you. But everyone, if you're trying to create change, a great thing for you to do is most of us have about 4 anchor points in a day that are really bright line anchor points, right? Like you wake up, you get to work, lunch happens, you leave work. That's our 4 main anchor points. If you can list some activities that need to happen at those anchor points, and even if you write them down and you tick them off until they become just what you are and who you are, again, it's yes, I did this. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did this. And this is based on a book from the Checklist Manifesto as well. They actually did this inside a hospital. There was 9 different hospitals. And they did this checklist. And it was when they were going in for surgery. So it's wash your hands, make sure the area is sterile, all the rest of it. And they went through this checklist, and you might think, oh, what? They're doctors. They don't need a checklist to make sure the area is clean. They implemented this checklist, and over the next 18 months, they saved I think it was $78 million. I know it was in the high, nearly $100 million from basically infection. And they also they decreased it by 60%. I think wasn't the mortality rate, or maybe it was the recovery rate, which is crazy as well. And they saved a crazy amount of lives. So it's just having these checklists, these mundane checklists, actually make sure, yes, I did this, yes, I did this, yes, I did this. It keeps you on route towards becoming that best version of yourself. So if you can create these unsexy, boring checklists that keep you on track to becoming the person that you want to become, it's probably one of the things you can do that just keeps you on track on a day-to-day basis.
Oh man, I on Wednesday, one of my boys we always do our deadlift session, and I happened to pull a personal best that morning, and so I always I send him the video of my PB before I post it on any of my socials to G him up. It's like a running theme between me and my client. He gets first access to the lift. I'm really doing it to G him up. Maybe I'm showing off a little bit, but I'm hoping he has a great session. And one of the things though is that there's just bits of the lift that he he'll change, you know what I mean, in his setup, his ritual, his pre-performance ritual. And, it all comes back to what we're saying. It's like a whole nother performance podcast, which we won't start because we should be wrapping up about now. But it just draws to the point. Like, I get in these conversations because pretty much the only training thing I put up on my socials is my deadlift. So I cop a lot of questions about deadlifting, and some of them are very intricate, which I haven't even thought about. But it's more to the point that, like, it's something that I really enjoy doing. I constantly see it as a learning experience, a skill that I'm forever refining. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's why I love it. I spend all week thinking about deadlifting. As the moment I put the bar down, and from that set, I'm thinking 7 days ahead. I can't wait. But I did want to, before we go, at least we talked about water, and I had something to add to it. Like, I love what you said, because let's face it, that's probably where most of our listeners should be starting if they're just not drinking enough water. And so again, like, one of the things that I'll tell two stories here very, very quickly. One was this. I got a water filtration system because I hate some of the water that we've had over various places we've lived in Melbourne. Now, the first one I got was a triple system that would sit on top of the bench. Unfortunately, the flow that would come out of it was just really slow. Now, that's enough friction for me not to drink water. I hate to admit it, but that's just the type of person I am. I run to a schedule as well, and there's just things have a certain value that I'm willing to invest in my time. That's recently why I changed where I get my coffee in the morning as well. Unfortunately, like, these guys that I love it from, they just take about 5 minutes too long. So I went somewhere else. I just can't bear to start off my morning with someone who takes too long to make my coffees. So what I did was, with that water filtration system, is I got a unit which has a fast flow. Okay, so I got an urn unit, which is actually gravity filtration, which I didn't think was going to be as good, but then when I looked at the stats behind it, it's actually nearly identical. And so now I turn it on, and it's like a fast flow. Problem solved. Love drinking my water. The second thing, and this was more for my wife. Okay, she doesn't drink enough water, but she doesn't really like water. She loves sparkling water. So what do? I go to the supermarket and I buy 5 cases at a time, and they sit under the stairs in our little dungeon there. And that means at any given point in time, we don't run out ever. Okay, there is absolutely no friction, and she probably drinks 3 times as much water as she used to.
Well, dude, that's why we bought one of those sort of what are they called? The ones that make sparkling at home, and this is sparkling water. Like, I drink more sparkling water than not sparkling water. It's just who I am, because I enjoy it.
You're a sparkling man.
Exactly, brother. So, like, this is at the office. It makes me want to drink more water as well. But what was happening was, it was taking too long because it's 2 liters, right? So it runs out of gas for a bit. So I go half sparkling, half normal, and it's still pretty good. When I come back to that point I talked about before, the doctors, I actually saw this. It's like, they saved 1,500 lives in 18 months. They saved $75 million, and they decreased infection rate by 60%. Like, that's from the checklist. Like, that's crazy, man. Like, when we can look at this, in a nutshell, man, like, I think, guys, habits are the crucial things. If you can have the Seinfeld strategy we talked about, if you can use the paperclip strategy we talked about, if you can make it easy so you feel like you're winning to start with, right? Don't make it too complex, make it easy. When I probably actually haven't told anyone this. When I wanted to start training first thing in the morning, I created the habit where I didn't actually have to train. I just had to get to the gym. And I actually didn't train a couple of times. I just needed to, I train at like 4:30, 4:15 in the morning. So it's probably before most people actually should ever train. But what was happening is, I wasn't feeling tired. I wasn't feeling like awake, and like I would lay there in bed. I'd wake up in the morning, and I was trying to adjust my system to wake up at that time. And then the thought of actually going to the gym and going through a session, like, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm just literally going to go back to sleep. So what I did is, I sort of said to myself, it's like, I don't have to train. I just have to get to the gym. Okay. So all I have to do is get to the gym. So it was so easy to actually do the habit, that it made it simple. Right. And that's so crucial.
But that was, man, I say something similar to clients when they come back from a break. So let's say, like, one of my guys goes away for a couple of months overseas, comes back, and the first week back at training sucks. And I say to him, you don't have to enjoy this session. You have to do this so you can enjoy next week.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because the fact you're here is this vote, this action that you've taken to be the identity of the person you are. You're a trainer. You train. You know what
Yes.
I mean? And that's the difference between someone who has it at an identity level and someone who doesn't, is they will go through it even when it sucks. When Ruben was born and I took about 4 days away from the gym, and then, because let's face it, it was probably like 4 hours sleep over that 4 nights to start with. And Zoe said to me, she goes, you need to just go to the gym. I went there and I nearly fell asleep because I laid down to like jump on the roller or something. And literally I spent 20 minutes just doing a light stretch and then I went home because I couldn't load anything. I was like delirious. But you know what? That started and me coming back. And then the next day, you know, I did there and I went some light work. And then the next day I was back into it. You know what I mean? But I needed to just get there and just go, yep, cool. This is who I am. And then the rest came.
I think one last thing I just want to finish this off with, man, like, because I know we've been talking for a while, is anyone who's trying to create a habit, you need to look at it as nourishment, not punishment. Because if you think that training is like, yes, it will be tough, but it's tough in a good way because you are becoming the best version of you. Now, training is always hardest at the very start, like at the very start, right? You can't walk. Some people like you're like, yeah, you're doing movements that you haven't done before. But if you see this as a punishment exercise because you are overweight, you will never put that habit into your life long term because you're looking at the habit as a form of punishment and not nourishment. The only habits that really stick are the ones that we really want inside our life, and the ones we never want pain in our life. So if we see training as pain and as a punishment for being overweight, then as soon as we're not overweight, then we'll remove that out of our life because subconsciously we put that into our brain that we don't want to have that. And it's the same as nutrition and dieting. You know, if you're looking at me sticking to the nutrition plan as punishment because I'm overweight, well, then you're never going to stick to it long term. It's not going to be sustainable because inside your brain, you're looking at dieting or as nutrition as a form of punishment. And again, not nourishment to create the healthiest version of yourself. So if you can just have a quick mindset shift, we're going to do a whole podcast on mindset, but if you can have a quick mindset shift when you're actually implementing all these habits in, then all of this is taking you to the best version of you so you can have the best possible life, so you can have the healthiest and the most longevity, so you can show up for everyone around you. Like, I think that's one of the most crucial things because, you know, these habits will only stick if you know your why behind them, and your why behind them is all about becoming the best version of you and the healthiest version of you for whatever reason, whether it be for your kids or to be laid. I don't really care what your reason is, but like it has to have a positive reason, and the training needs to be positive, and the nutrition needs to have a positive like mind frame, because if not, it'll never stick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man.
You got anything else you want to share, mate, or you think that's it for today?
No, we've done it. I'll just end us with something we've already said, is that like you are a product of your environment. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes the big calls are the ones that mean a lot, like finding a group, finding a tribe. You know, I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, like people in a really toxic job environment, they change jobs and everything just falls into line. Same with relationships. You know what I mean? So grit and willpower will get you through short term.
Yeah.
Like, thinking that it's going to do anything for a sustained period of time it's not a realistic solution.
Well, how's this, man? Like when you're saying that grit and willpower won't get you through, like I believe everything is proximity and accountability. Even if it's a shitty training program and a really shitty diet, like, and you are just kept accountable, you'll probably get great results if you compared to someone who's not accountable at all. You know, they looked at people taking medicine, right? So like if you've got an illness and the doctor tells you to take this medicine, only 33% of people actually take the medicine in the dosages that the doctor tells them to do. And then when you're looking at for your dog, right? Man's best friend. Your dog needs to take this medicine. You're only giving it to your dog like 60% of the time that you should. And you essentially love your dog and you want it to be healthy. So this is like to get away from illness. And like humans only do it 30% of the time because they're not accountable really, right? What are you going to do with your diet? You're not even ill. Like, do you think you're going to stick to it more than 30% of the time if you're not kept accountable? So proximity around people that raise your vibration to the next level and accountability to someone to check in with you are the two things that actually can help you implement these habits that last for good. Like Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich that you need to find your own mastermind, and a mastermind is essentially a community. And your community, your health mastermind, and he said catch up with them at a minimum once a week and check in with them and make sure that you've done everything you're going to do over that next week. So whether you join a community that you train with, at least join a community that you check in online with once a week that keep you on track and keep you accountable of the things you said you were going to do. Because if you say you're going to do it and you're accountable to no one, you're probably going to do it probably 30% of the time, and you'll fall off just like everyone else.
What else do we see in this industry, Trav? It's that inaction, or it's the perception of action, but without anything actually eventuating from it. You know what I mean? It's this paralysis to analysis. How many times have you been asked, "What's the best diet?"
Oh, dude.
You know what I mean? Or, "Hey, what could you give me your training program, the one that you're doing?" You know what I mean? Like, so it's. The fact of the matter is, you've just got to get started. Okay, we can spend all the time in the world thinking and like looking at the theory and assessing the pros and cons of this, but and again, it comes back to that culture, that tribe sort of thing. There are pros and cons, but this is one of the features that it gives people that certainty of like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do. Come here and we'll.
Exactly, brother. Well, guys, this was the RBT podcast on habit formation and creation. That was Ben Cant. This is Travis Jones. We'll check you on the next episode.